All right, cool. Let's get this going. So for my presentation for this assignment, my vulnerable population that I've chosen is grandparents raising grandchildren. And just a little back story of why I chose this. So my wife's grandparents, her grandfather is 86 years old and grandmother is 76, and they currently have a 15-year-old. And so when she was just a couple months old, they took her in due to the daughter being a drug addict and couldn't take care of their daughter, and they have raised her ever since. And so I've been able to see firsthand how this affects this population and kind of what they're going through. So, just some health concerns. The physical effects that this will have: um, diabetes, hypertension, insomnia, malnutrition, definitely self-care deficit, high risk for communicable diseases, and then safety, of course, in case the child overpowers the um, grandparent. And then psychological, so isolation, they're not able to go out and about with their peers as often or enjoy retirement. And then depression, conflict, and manipulation. And for instance, my wife's grandma, she has been in the hospital recently with quite a few heart issues that have been developed, probably strictly due to the extra stress. I mean, who's to say that she wouldn't already have these heart problems if she wasn't raising um, a 15-year-old at 76 years old? But I'm sure it's an exacerbating factor on her heart and her heart's health. So as far as media goes, how does the media portray this population? From my opinion and from my past, it's not commonly focused on, and maybe I'm just missing some TV shows or well-known movies. The only one I could think of was Spider-Man and how he was raised by his elderly aunt. And so some of the media portrays perceptions of elderly that they're incapable, they're less involved, aloof. I think of Spider-Man, she was just kind of oblivious to the fact that he was out on the streets, he was never home at night, and whatnot. But also, others depict positive, healthy interactions and involved role models in these children's care. So that is how media plays a role. As far as support, family support is crucial. Allow for personal time, assist with personal needs, moral support, and then there's lack of support. So inability to relate, drama with family roles, creating stress, physical exhaustion. So for instance, my wife's dad, for instance, at the beginning of this year, he went up to their house and was helping, Kiara is her name, register for classes, just because that's something that they did not know how to help her with. And so having that family support for things like that is very crucial. Um, Roles of peers. I love this picture. So often this group is taken away from time with peers, um, because they are focused physically and emotionally on these children that they are taking care of, where normally at this age they will be visiting with peers quite often because they're enjoying not working anymore and having more spare time. So this can cause feelings of resentment and isolation. Um, if they do have peers involved in their lives, they often help create an environment of, like we mentioned on the slide before, support, relatable conversation, connection, sense of identity, which can be very healthy. So, does this vulnerability with this population have a cyclical, I always get that word wrong, nature? So, although the children involved in this population may not grow up to directly raise their own grandchildren, they are at high risk for other health disparities, such as continual low income, mental health issues, higher levels of behavior and emotional problems. Okay, legal and political. So, what role does the legal and political system play with this population? I wouldn't say it hinders it at all, um, but it definitely helps. And from what I've found, Actually, in 2018, President Trump signed in the Supporting Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Act, which is awesome after I read into that. So, this is helping 2.6 million children across the country. So, the goal of this act is to help gather valuable information and provide resources to help these caregivers meet the health and educational, nutritional, and other needs for these children, but also while helping them make sure they take care of their self, whether that's physically, mentally, or emotionally. They also, through the government, can provide financial assistance, food and nutritional programs, free or low-cost medical care such as Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, um, respite care, and then housing assistance. So potential barriers and international scope. The American culture. So immigration history created patterns of leaving the family. Individualistic culture stresses the needs of individuals over the group as a whole. So, for instance, here in America, we see this in healthcare. We kind of, when it's time for the grandma to, leave the coop and to go into assisted living, we push for that because we have our own individual lives and we want to focus on what's going on in our lives and not be strapped down caring for our parents. Where other cultures, they that's important to them is to take care of their grandparents. And so family-oriented cultures, multi-generational households are common and healthy. Family responsibilities are ingrained in youth and emphasis on family and generational traditions. So socioeconomic status, just some statistics for you. So there's a 49% unemployment rate for grandmothers who are raising their grandchildren. One fifth of grandparents have incomes that fall below the poverty line. Um, 33% of the grandparents that are caring for their grandchildren have not graduated from high school. And then 21% of grandparents who are taking care of their grandkids are living below the poverty line, which is pretty incredible, those statistics. It's kind of eye-opening. So guardians in a low socioeconomic status, you know, insurance being unavailable, these are things they face. Unable to retire, higher working pressure, financial pressure to keep up with basic needs or demands of children, and other added stress involved. So race and ethnicity. Here's some more statistics for you. So 51.1% of these grandparents here in the United States that are raising their grandchildren are white, not Hispanic. 24.2% are African American, 18.7% are Hispanic or Latino, 2.9% are Asian, 2% are American Indian or Alaskan Native, and 0.3% are Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. So in addition to their current risk, the population could also be facing high risk of heart disease, if African American, safety for self and children under their care, difficulty finding care services for self or their children, or grandchildren, vulgar verbal abuse affecting mental health, and then poverty. And like we mentioned in the slide before, almost 20% of these grandparents raising these grandchildren live in poverty. Religion and what role that plays. So benefits on health outcome for this community include community found within religion. Um, so they can rely on their peers and they have a sense of family, sense of self and identity, which boosts their sense of purpose in life, and then faith in a greater good, which creates a motivation and gives them hope to keep going and to keep powering through what they are working with and the struggles they're dealing with, and then spiritual direction as well. So all in all, religion has potential to play an important role in assisting in these grandparents and the roles that they play as caregivers. So when it comes to gender does not really affect health outcomes within this population. So male and female are equally affected. It is uncommon for an individual to take on responsibility if living alone. geographical location. So the geography definitely affects ease of access to certain things such as healthcare, appointments, checkups, support groups, whether that's on a weekly or monthly basis, nutrition, how close are they to a grocery store? Are they able to have ease of access to fruits and vegetables, and such as that? And then variety of activities for adults and children to get involved in. And telehealth and telemedicine would be crucial. It would provide sense of security. You would have someone, an outlet, someone you can rely on to know that they'll be taking care of you. Um, so provide a sense of security, lessen anxiety about the unknowns when raising a child. A lot of these grandparents, they are raising these children in a world that is still new to them, and so there's a lot of changes going on that they have to adapt to, um, that they could benefit greatly from telehealth and receiving advice. And then, anyway, provides care when otherwise issue may have seemed not worth the effort. Um, so, for instance, if they're needing to receive care for depression or self-care, they're just not taking care of themselves and they have malnutrition. If they have this option, telehealth, they can get in contact with a doctor who can help them get on the right track. So as far as bias, implicit assumptions, some of the assumptions that can be made are, they're too old to be parents, or they're incapable of filling the children's needs, um, or children are struggling or come from a rough background. And then the explicit, out of touch with culture and what may matter to the children. You can definitely see that they lived in a different time, and it's hard for them to connect on those levels when they live in a totally different world. I mean, just look at technology and the gap between grandparents and their grandchildren. And then what will come of the children when the grandparents pass? That's always a issue and a worry, um, as far as, what will happen to them, who will take care of them, how old will they be? Will they be out on the streets? Will they have another family member to take care of them? And then international scope. So unfortunately, with this vulnerable population, there's not a lot of research I was able to find internationally, but in the grand scheme of things, so these disparities affect grandparents, all throughout the world. Um, that's just how it goes. Grandparents are on the rise of needing to raise their grandchildren due to many reasons. So determining factors include, but are not limited to, new and upcoming, more problems with alcohol and drug use, or socioeconomic status, education or lack of education. Um, and so that is my presentation. These are my references. I appreciate you taking the time to take this journey with me to learn more about grandparents raising grandchildren. Um, they're pretty incredible, the role that they play in these children's life, and they pretty much give them a second chance. And whatever we can do as nurses or just as members of society to support these grandparents, however we can, we should do our part. And thank you so much.